part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, hello, hello. We are back with another episode. If I could describe my week, it would be like that in the words of Scott Stapp. Hold me now. I'm 6 feet from the edge and I'm thinking
I'm
maybe
not sure.
6 feet ain't so far down.
When did this become a podcast that features your vocals on a weekly basis?
Well, it's not. This is actually the sports podcast.
For the Sports Collector.
Yeah, welcome to the Ball Card Show. I'm Jason Otero.
I'm Gary LeMaster, and we are really, really glad to be with you today. I wasn't sure whether we were going to get an episode in this week. Jason texts me on Monday night.
Yeah.
Hey, and he texted me because we hung out on Friday night or Thursday night last week. Hey, so I tested positive for COVID. Yay.
I always do stuff 2 years after everybody else thinks it's cool, you know?
Yeah. So he had COVID all week, 2 days in. Now, keep in mind, I've been off work for 7 weeks now with a bum shoulder, recovering from shoulder surgery. He texted me 2 days in, dude, how are you doing this? I'm so bored. I'm like, yeah, add about 30 times the boredom that you have right now, and you've got my life.
Yeah, guys, you wanted to hear us talk about boredom? Well, you came to the right place. This is the Ball Card Show. All right, so
yeah,
let's talk about sports cards.
Okay,
jump right into it. For those
don't talk about your whole family just going down the COVID road anymore.
My kids are fine. My wife,
they're like feral.
My wife
right
got tired.
To take care of themselves.
My wife got tired of having to pick up my slack, so she decided to get COVID today. She wants to be quarantined.
As I said, the kids are just feral, taking care of themselves right now.
But everybody's good. Very mild symptoms. We've been very fortunate.
Good. That's a positive thing.
You know what else is positive?
What's that?
Whoever is selling this Mickey Mantle 9.5.
Auction update.
Currently at $6.7 million with 8 days left.
7.9 million, including buyer's premium.
Yeah, with the premium.
Yeah.
It's a hefty card, you know?
It's going to clear 10 mil. I think it's going to clear 10 mil.
You know, when I was little and people talked about the valuable cards, it was always the Mantle conversation. You know, you don't ever, always look. Your grandpa might have some Mickey Mantles up in the attic. You got to take,
Well, how many where that card came from? Okay. So, and some of the people listen to this is going to be news to them too. So back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, the sports card market, I know this is hard to believe, was not dominated by eBay and Facebook. Okay. And there was a guy named Al. Why am I blanking on his last name? Anyhow, he used to take out ads in Beckett, in Sporting News, in any publication where he was buying baseball card collections, right? And he would show up at the National with $200,000-$300,000 just in $100 bills in a big roll.
Yeah.
Right. And he bought everything in sight. And this particular Mantle, he found a massive stash in Pennsylvania somewhere in somebody's attic of 52 Bowman cards. And there were like 45 or 50 Mickey Mantle rookies, and they were all really nice. Now this was in the mid 80s when that card was a couple $1,000s, which at the time was like, oh my God, for a piece of baseball cardboard, $2,000-$3,000. Wow. Mm-hmm. And he bought this whole collection, and out of that collection, there have been at least 20 to 25 of those Mantles that were 7s or higher. Mm-hmm. Well, this was the nicest one. This one was purchased by a private collector in the early 90s for, maybe it was mid 90s, about $50,000 is what he paid for this card. And he didn't have it graded until just a few months ago.
Wow.
Just sat on it. So his $50,000 investment 20 years ago is paying off very, very handsomely. But yeah, back in the day, that guy was the guy. He was, Al Rosen. His name was Al Rosen. He was a character, man. He was an absolute character. He had a caricature in all of his ads of his face. And every publication that was even remotely related to sports or sports cards, every month there was a big ad buying cards. Yeah. So that's the story of this Mickey Mantle.
Yeah. Where do you think this gets to though? 8 days left. That's going to top.
10. It's going to clear
top
10.
I think. Yeah.
It'll clear 10 million with the buyer's premium. It might get to 10.2, 10.3.
Wow.
Yep. Auction house is going to clean up. They're going to make themselves a cool $250,000 or so plus.
Well, it's hard to promote a 9.5 mantle, you know.
Well, I was going to say that it's not like they had to work real hard on this one. Hey guys, we have this. Who wants it? And the floodgates open. And what's crazy is this is going to get bought and it's going to get stuck in somebody's safe deposit box.
Oh yeah,
that'll be that.
Yeah, somebody's
never seen the light of day again.
Yeah. BBCE is in the news again.
Yeah,
and this time. Excuse me, I'm yawning.
That COVID yawn.
It's the COVID yawn. It's just to be clear, we're recording on Zoom. I'm not yawning into Gary's face right now.
Like it would matter.
Like we normally do. But 86 Fleer basketball, the box. There's an opening. It's supposed to be sealed up. There's this people that are creating content saying there's been a scam. BBCE is at it again. This is just like the Jake Paul Pokemon card thing. You got other people saying, no, that's not what happened. But I want to get to the bottom of this because I needed some clarity on what it meant when you would send off to authenticate a box. And apparently there's different titles for that and all that. So just kind of walk us through this 86 Fleer is a great example because it's maybe the most iconic wax box that there is. So why don't you kind of walk us through what it's supposed to happen with BBCE, what did happen with this particular box, and why people were in an uproar over it.
Okay, so up until the early 90s, the collation of packs was automated and predictable. Upper Deck was actually who first came out with the true random collation. And you see that in a lot of early Upper Deck products because some packs would have 3 of the same card in it, right? But up until then, the collation was straightforward. It followed the sheet order. You could predict it. If you opened up a pack of Fleer, 86, 87 Fleer, and a certain card was on top, there was going to be a Michael Jordan in it. If there was a certain sticker on the back, there was going to be a Larry Bird in it. Like you could like clockwork predict it. So this box was authenticated by BBCE. Now I will say in BBCE's defense, that's the only time you're going to hear me say that. They did not authenticate this as from a sealed case. They did not authenticate it as a factory box. They just authenticated it as a built box. So this box was opened at the National by Whatnot. And it was very obvious to anybody who knows the collation patterns that there was something really wrong. And nothing was coming out the way that it should. And the collation patterns are so predictable that for there to be that much error across the board seemed really left field. So as there was more digging done in this, the original owner of the box came out and said, well, hey, here's, we had this box authenticated. In the process of it being authenticated, BBCE sent us back 2 of the packs out of the box because they said that the seal had popped on one, although it did not show that there was any evidence of tampering, just the back flap, the wax had popped, and they won't authenticate that. And then there was another pack that did show evidence of tampering. They replaced those with just 2 random packs that they felt good about the authenticity of.
So question for you right there.
Yeah.
If I send in a box for it to be authenticated and they had this same issue where there's one that we're not sure about, think it's okay, this other one is definitely not good, do they sell you those packs at that point?
No, I think in this situation, the original owner acquired 2 more packs and sent them in and made sure that they were authentic.
Okay.
And what he likely did was just bought a couple of slabbed PSA 7 or 8 packs and put them in the box. A lot of people will refer to this as a Franken box, but it's pretty common in the vintage sealed world. They're just somebody that collects that stuff wants high quality stuff in there. And, you know, when you have sealed product that's 40, 50, 60 years old, sometimes it's tough to get a completely full factory box. So this box gets opened and all this starts to come to pass. Now, I will say again, BBCE then came out with a very detailed, and we can post this link for anybody that's interested on Facebook to our group. So if you're not a member of the group, go join. And if you're interested in this, we'll have this link posted. BBCE's rebuttal to the uproar. And they did a very good job of showing and explaining how and why what we saw in that box could have actually been from the factory that way. A rare situation, but it all has to do with the sheet order and where a box starts in the collation and all that type of stuff. Right edge cards. It's pretty in depth. There's a lot of math involved, and but if you're interested in it, they had a good rebuttal. Here's my issue. BBCE in general. And through this process, I actually learned a couple of other things. BBCE, much like PSA, charges a flat fee plus a percentage of the market value of whatever they're authenticating. However, their terms of service explicitly states that they are not to be held responsible in any way, shape, or form if they are wrong. That's a problem to me. If I'm paying, like that guy likely paid somewhere around $6,000 when it was all said and done for that box to be authenticated. Well, if I'm paying you $6,000 and you're like, yeah, well, we might be right, we might be wrong. Tough. That's a problem. Now, if you're, I mean, especially because what you're basically providing is about a penny's worth of saran wrap with your name on it and a piece of paper on the bottom that you signed. When you have high profile issues like this, like the Pokemon case that was filled with G.I. Joe cards, like there's all kinds of things that if you are going to charge that kind of money, you need to stand behind what you're saying. And throughout this process, I actually learned a couple of other things. There are only two out of all of the grading companies that are out there right now. Only two who actually guarantee not only their grades, but when they say something is authentic, it's authentic. And that's PSA, who I hate with the fire of 1,000 suns, and CSG. SGC has in their terms and conditions that they are not responsible for being wrong. Beckett has in their terms and conditions that they are not responsible for being wrong. And I guarantee you that these other companies, HGA, FCG, Rare Edition, GMA, all these other grading companies are out there. They have that same thing in their terms and conditions that they're not responsible if they're wrong. If the only service you're providing is your opinion and some plastic, then you don't get to charge very much for it if you're not willing to stand behind your expertise. Like with what I do for a living, what Jason does for a living, if we go and screw something up, guess who's responsible for it? We are. We don't get to look at the customer and say, well, hey, I know you thought you were hiring a professional, but toodaloo. Like, that's just not, to me, when you're charging that kind of money, especially when you're taking a piece of the owner's profits, you got to stand behind it. So, and there's people that are out there saying, oh, this is the death knell for BBCE. Here's what's sick about it. No, it's not. The vast majority of people are stupid and they're going to continue to use the service. There will be some who don't, but there's lots who still will. Just like with PSA and all their trimming scandals and everything else.
Yeah, I think I understand it a little better now. And I like that they give you that option rather than like if I just send a card off for a slab or it doesn't meet minimum grade or whatever, that they at least would sit on the box and allow them to make it a legit built box. But yeah, they've made the news twice in a year and not in a good way. So that's an issue. And what's the president's name? I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
Oh, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just you can tell he hates the camera. But he's very uncomfortable in a lot of those conversations.
Well, so what people forget about BBCE is the baseball card exchange is an actual sports card store, and it has been for 40 years. Steve is just a known within the hobby expert on sealed wax. So he started offering that service quite a few years ago, but that wasn't their primary income. That was the shop was. Well, now the authentication has become a huge part of what they do. And the shop is kind of second fiddle.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on. More scandal. Fernando Tatis hit with a huge suspension. Family is claiming that it was actually just medication to deal with a fungus or infection from a haircut.
Yeah.
What say you, Gary?
Well, here's what I say. I say that how do I want to phrase this right? Because I'm going to really piss off a lot of baseball purists.
How is steroids bad for baseball is what you're asking?
Well, in general, I think that the hypocrisy is staggering. It's just mind-blowing to me, the amount of hypocrisy that the baseball writers and these diehard old school, old head baseball guys have. If he was using a topical cream for ringworm that had something in it, I wouldn't be shocked, because he lives in the Dominican Republic and you can go buy basically anything you want over the counter in the Dominican Republic. Is it on him for not knowing what was in it? Yeah, absolutely. When you're getting paid that much money, you need to be cognizant of what you're putting in and on your body. That being said.
What now? Has anyone verified this story?
What do you mean?
Anybody from MLB?
Well, I don't know if anybody from MLB has verified it. I don't think MLB cares one way or the other. But Tatis and his agent and the MLBPA have said this came from this. And it's not surprising to me if it did at all. It doesn't change the fact that it's a banned substance and it was in his body. And MLB is saying, hey, that's the way it is. That's the rules. You deal with it. And that's fine. It's a harsh, stiff penalty, but hopefully he learns from it and comes back just fine. My issue with the outrage goes back to what I've said dozens of times in dozens of different places. We have an entire generation from the 50s to the mid to late 70s of baseball players, the vast majority of whom were so high on amphetamines while they played that it's not even funny. Literally, there were bowls of these things in clubhouses. They were called greenies. And I would make an extremely strong argument that methamphetamine has a much bigger impact on your ability to hit a baseball than steroids do. A much bigger impact on your ability to hit a baseball. You play in a doubleheader and you need some extra boost. What's helping you more? Steroids that are a long-term, basically healing agent for your body, or amphetamines that speed up your processing power and give you fake energy for 3 to 5 hours.
Just to be clear, it's also not legal to be on meth in the major leagues. Right
well,
now.
No, but my point is that people venerate these guys from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Nobody even blinks. Nobody says a word about throwing them out of the Hall of Fame. But God forbid somebody beefs up their body and, we can't have that.
So do you think that this scandal will be viewed the same way as like that era of power hitters getting busted?
No.
Do you think it has an impact on him long-term with his career?
I think that the wrist injury has much more of a potential to have an impact on him long-term in his career.
I'll cut to the chase. Could it have an effect on a Hall of Fame ballot?
It could, but I don't think it will. And here's why. Everybody forgets him, Juan Soto, Ronald Acuna. These dudes are still 22 and 23 years old. They've been in the majors for 3 or 4 years. A lot of them came in when they were 19 or 20 to the majors. Yeah. They are young. The guys who hold up the ballot for guys like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, guys who should have been absolute no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famers. I don't care what you think about steroids. Those guys, Rafael Palmeira, the guys who held all that up are going to be dead by the time Fernando Tatis is eligible to be on the ballot. Tatis is going to play for at least another 10 to 12 years, if not 15. And then another 5 before he's even eligible. So we're talking about a minimum of 15 to 20 years before he's even on a ballot. I also think it's kind of nuts to start projecting the Hall of Fame for a dude who's in his 3rd year.
I know, but
I mean, look at guys who have hot starts.
Topical cream could do it. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I mean, I think it's nuts to project that kind of stuff anyway. Dustin Pedroia looked like a lock for the Hall of Fame 3 years into his career. And now he's barely Hall of Very good because he didn't last very long. David Wright, same thing. Injuries ended his run.
What's it got to be like to be a Padres fan the day before this happens? You just locked in Soto.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, this doesn't get any better than this.
And Tatis is on his rehab assignments. He's going to be back soon. We basically added 2 monster players as acquisitions.
We'll see you next year. Yeah.
Now, speaking of Soto, though, everybody's like, oh, he's having a down year. Guys, I hate to break this to you, but he was having a down year until about June. And since June, he's hitting about 340. And by the end of the year, he's going to have taken that batting average that was 225 at the end of May, and he's going to be real close to 300, probably 285, 290. The kid just hits. That's all he does. He's a liability in the field. He's a below average defender. Doesn't matter.
You can hit the ball.
All he does is hit.
Let's close up with this. Keep it moving. Let's do a fantasy football. We can talk a little bit about.
We forgot to talk about the Tatis card.
Oh, we did.
So
why don't you tell that story real quick?
Yeah, this is a little closer to home for me just because it's a buddy of mine. So about 6 months ago, a buddy of mine hits the Bowman's Best Superfractor rookie, Fernando Tatis. Everybody loses their mind. And the thought process is this is a 6-figure card if it PSA 10s, maybe well into 6 figures. This was even before Tatis got hurt. We thought he was going to play a whole season. The card comes back. It's a PSA 1010. Cost him an arm and a leg to get it graded. Arm and a leg. Submits it to Golden for auction and is ready to rock and roll. The card is ready to get listed. The day before it gets listed, this comes out. This card has gone from what everybody was certain was going to be a 6-figure sale, maybe well into 6 figures. It's got a day and 10 hours left. It's at $7,000. At this point, unless something crazy happens, which I think it'll probably get to 20 in that range. But you're talking about an 80 to 90% drop in what the anticipated sale price of that card was. So poor Chase is just, I mean, that's got to be a kick in the teeth.
So once you set up an auction, there's no canceling it if the auction hasn't begun.
Well, I'm sure that there is. I haven't looked at Golden's terms, though. I know that PWCC's terms, if you do that, there are certain times where the ownership of the card will revert to PWCC. So at a certain point, it's like, well, I'd rather take something
than nothing.
Yeah. But he had about $5,000 wrapped up in just grading this card.
Just think, though, if somebody's stealing that card today because.
Oh, for sure. I've been telling people for the last 2 weeks, ever since this came out, buy his stuff. Yeah. All it's going to happen, you're betting cheap. Worst case scenario, he comes back next year and he hits 25 home runs and steals 25 bases and bats 280, and you still make some money. If he returns to full form, his cards are going to go back up, guys. Like the people, and this is the other thing that people forget about this market. The people who are buying those big cards are not 65 and 70-year-old guys that are complaining about the state of baseball and how these steroid guys, blah, 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 blah. That's not who it's buying these cards. So, there's a little bit of a longer term play there.
Yeah,
in my mind.
For sure. All right. To wrap it up.
Yep.
Everybody's got fantasy football drafts coming up.
Yep.
So just to help out a little bit, and there'll be implications into the hobby, but primarily what we're talking here is just fantasy football for your picks. just grabbed a few positions, and we're going to go over a couple names and just kind of give a rundown of what you're expecting. This could be a good pick, or this person is back, or watch out, be careful with this pick. So let's start out with QB. Just running a couple names first. Up first, Davis Mills. We know you love him.
I do love him.
What do you like for fantasy this year?
Well, I think that he's a guy, if you are going to follow the no quarterbacks until after round 8 mentality, he's a guy who I think by the end of the year is going to be quite a bit better numbers wise than a lot of the other potential guys you could be grabbing. I would grab him ahead of Baker Mayfield. I would grab him ahead of Justin Fields. I would grab him ahead of guys like either Geno Smith or Drew Lock, who probably aren't even going to get drafted. I would grab him ahead of Zach Wilson. I would grab him ahead of Tua. There's a lot of guys that he's going to be better than, that you're going to be able to stack your roster in other places if you just wait.
All right, let's move over. Keep it moving. Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson is a guy who I think is probably going a little bit too high. And we're going to talk about.
You wouldn't have said that a couple of years ago.
No, I wouldn't have. I was super high on Lamar, but here's the problem.
Didn't you go Lamar with your first pick 2 years ago?
I did.
Yeah,
I did. It wasn't number 1 overall, but it was my first round pick. But my thought process with Lamar Jackson is this: 2 things. 1, he hasn't had a lot of training camp. He's been angling to get a new deal. Also, and this is the bigger one, who's his outside receiver that keeps a safety away from Mark Andrews? Who is it? If you tell me it's Rashad Bateman, I'm going to say, well, he's going to have to prove that, because he didn't prove it last year. If you tell me that it is Devin Duvernay, I'm going to laugh at you.
It's Devin Duvernay.
Exactly.
You didn't laugh.
Oh, sorry. The point is that there's Mark Andrews is the guy who he goes bail out to. And if there's always a safety shadowing Mark Andrews now, until one of those guys proves that they need some help, it's going to cut into Lamar Jackson's productivity. And if you're drafting him before the 6th or 7th round, I think you're doing it wrong.
Okay. All righty. Wide receiver, Nico Collins.
Houston. Somebody's got to step into that number 2 role. He started to late in the year. And again, this goes back to me being high on Davis Mills. Nico Collins is a big, strong, physical, reasonably fast guy. He's a guy who I think has a lot of, this is a name blast from the past, but he's got a lot of Mushin Muhammad in him. He's a kid who I think could catch 75 or 80 passes for 1,100 yards, 1,000 yards, and 8 or 9 touchdowns. He's just that big target. And with Brandon Cook stretching the field on the other side, it's going to not let anybody roll help to him. And he's got the physical tools to do some cool things there.
All right. Up next, didn't get a lot of love in fantasy, but you're big on this guy, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I think that Justin Jefferson is, again, he's not a flashy guy. Everybody's picking Jamar Chase ahead of Justin Jefferson. A lot of average draft position stuff. You're getting that type of movement. I've seen Tyreek Hill going ahead of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's a guy that I'm going to pick in the back end of the first round. If I've got to pick in the back end of the first round, I'm going to grab Justin Jefferson and laugh all the way to the bank. He's going late second in a lot of rounds. So something to think about there.
All right. Tight end.
Yep.
Noah Fant.
Both Geno Smith and Drew Lock. I really hate that Drew Lock got COVID. He was supposed to start that game last night, and then they were going to make an evaluative decision. And he got COVID. And I don't know whether they're going to stretch it out or whether that ended the QB battle. But I liked Noah Fant better with Drew Lock just because of the connection that they had when they were in Denver. He threw to Noah Fant a lot. But Geno Smith has always shown a propensity when he's been on the field to check down. And Noah Fant is a really athletic tight end. And I think the running game in Seattle is going to be good enough that play action is going to be a real thing. And Noah Fant could have a really nice year as a 6th, 7th, 8th round pick.
Yep. I think that'll be a good fit there. Mark Andrews.
Mark Andrews is a regression guy to me for what we were just talking about earlier with Lamar Jackson. Until one of those wide receivers shows that they require at least some attention from a safety, the middle of the field is going to get real clogged up. And that's going to make it tough for Andrews. He feasts in those situations. Marquise Brown, nobody ever used to give Marquise Brown any love, but if you look at Marquise Brown's numbers and his speed, he required help, and that opened a lot of things up in the middle of the field. Until one of those new guys shows that, it's going to be tougher for Andrews. Do I think he's going to be terrible? No. But is he going to be tight end 1 or 2? I don't think so.
Okay. Running backs, as we finish up here, let's do Jonathan Taylor first.
Okay. Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion, should not be your number 1 pick if you have the number 1 pick in the draft. If you can get him at 3, 4, or 5, yes, he should not be the number 1 overall pick. And here's why. The Colts have said loudly, we do not want Jonathan Taylor to have the volume that he had last year. We want Nyheim Hines to be our 3rd down back. We want Nyheim Hines to catch 60-plus passes. We don't want to kill Jonathan Taylor. We don't want him to be 3 years in the league and done. We don't want him to be another Zeke Elliott. Yeah, we don't want 3 years of amazing production, and then we ran him into the ground, and he's a league average back after that. Is he going to be productive? Absolutely. Is he going to put up the numbers he did last year? Not a chance. Not a chance. And he's not going to catch anywhere near as many passes. And that was where a lot of his value came into play.
All right. Javonte Williams.
Love him. Everybody's worried about Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon is 8 million years old. He may vulture some goal line work, but Javonte Williams is fast. He is strong. He is powerful. He has good hands. And guess what he also has now? An actual NFL quarterback who can actually threaten defenses and not let people stack the box. Last year, Denver's passing game was so bad that he was running into 7-man boxes a lot, 6-man boxes a lot. He's not going to be having that this year with Russell Wilson there. He just isn't. And I could see a really, really big year out of Javonte Williams. He's a guy you can get in the late 2nd round right now.
Yeah. So if you did have the 1st pick overall in the draft, what would be your top 3 picks?
Oh,
you got 3 options, 3 different ways to go on 1st overall pick.
Okay. So first one is the high variance pick. Okay. And it all depends on whether you think he can be healthy. If he can be, I would go Christian McCaffrey. But that's a big if. That's why I said it's high variance. If you pick him 1st overall and he stays healthy, he's going to rush for 1,200 yards. He's going to catch 75 passes. He's going to score 15 touchdowns. Okay. That's just what's going to happen if he's healthy, but that's a big if. If you want to go more conservative, more straight line thought process, 2 potential ways you can go. You could go receiver, although that's a little bit non-traditional, but there are 2 or 3 guys that I think are probably worthwhile of taking there. I wouldn't lose my mind if somebody took Jamar Chase. That's a thought process, but McCaffrey, Chase, I think is not a horrifyingly terrible move if you want to go that route. But if I was going to take a receiver number 1 overall personally, it would be really hard for me not to take Justin Jefferson if I went that route, because I think he's going to have 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns.
Wow.
I think he's 1,500, 13.
Risky picks.
Well, I didn't say they weren't. But another guy that I think is sneaky. And I'm not saying you should take him number 1 overall, but I think by the end of the year, he could be RB1 as far as production goes, is Joe Mixon. That offensive line is so drastically better than it was the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been a top 10 guy those years with literally you and me up front. Like, it's been awful. As a Bengals fan, I can tell you it's been horrifying, that offensive line. And they have beefed that offensive line so much They've got some graders in there now. Lyle Collins is a road grader. It would not shock me to see Joe Mixon catch 60 or put up Christian McCaffrey numbers. It would not shock me in the least if he put up Christian McCaffrey numbers.
Sick. All right. I'm a little fired up. When's our draft? We got one coming up next week, don't we?
I've got like Friday? 17 of them coming up.
Oh, right.
I've got a bunch. Ours is the 26th.
Yeah.
Day before Leslie's birthday, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what we got cooking.
All right. This has been the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast
for the sports collector.
Take care.
Peace.